I pulled into my driveway in suburban Phoenix, Arizona, exhausted after another long shift at the hospital, only to find my most prized possession gone from where it had sat under its car cover for the past 3 weeks. The empty space in front of my garage sent a cold shock through my entire body, and I stood there staring at the oil stain on the concrete, like it might somehow bring back my 1967 Chevrolet Camaro SS. My name is Ryan Lawson, and I had been working double shifts as a surgical nurse at Banner Good Samaritan Medical Center, saving every spare dollar to finally get that engine rebuild done on my vintage Camaro. The car had been my grandfather's, passed down to me when he died 5 years ago, and it meant more to me than any possession I had ever owned. Sure, it needed work. The engine had seized up about a month ago, and I had been waiting for the specialized parts to arrive from a supplier in Detroit. But it was not junk. It was a classic American muscle car that just needed some love and attention. I immediately checked my phone to see if I had missed any calls or messages. Nothing. I walked around my property, thinking maybe someone had played a sick joke and moved it somewhere, but deep down I knew better. This had HOA written all over it. The Sunset Valley HOA had been a thorn in my side since I moved into this supposedly peaceful neighborhood 18 months ago. The president, a woman named Karren Mitchell, was exactly what you would picture when you heard the term HOA president. She was a 52-year-old woman with a blonde bob haircut that she probably asked to speak to the manager about at least once a week, and she treated the neighborhood like her personal kingdom. Every interaction I had with her ended with some complaint or warning about something I was supposedly doing wrong. I stormed over to her house, which was only 4 doors down from mine. The sun was setting behind the desert mountains, painting the sky orange and purple, but I barely noticed the view. My heart was pounding as I rang her doorbell 3 times in quick succession. Karren opened the door wearing a pristine white pantsuit, holding a glass of white wine. "Ryan," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "What can I do for you?" "Where is my car?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice level but failing. "Oh, that eyesore you had sitting in your driveway. We had it towed this morning." It was in violation of our HOA bylaws, Section 12, Paragraph 4. No inoperable vehicles may be visible from the street for more than 72 hours. That car was covered, and it was not junk. That was a vintage Camaro worth thousands of dollars. Karren took a sip of her wine and gave me a condescending smile. "It looked like junk to me. The towing company has it now. You can contact them if you want to dispute the fees, but according to our agreement, vehicles in violation can be removed at the owner's expense." "You cannot just tow someone's car without notice," I said, my hands clenching into fists at my sides. "Actually, we can. You signed the HOA agreement when you purchased your home. You should have read it more carefully. The towing company is Desert Star Auto Impound. They are located on East Van Buren Street." "Good evening, Ryan." She closed the door in my face before I could respond. I stood there for a moment, breathing heavily, trying to process what had just happened. This woman had just had my grandfather's car towed like it was some abandoned junker, without even having the decency to call or leave a note. I drove immediately to the impound lot, my mind racing with worst-case scenarios. The place was a chain-link fortress with razor wire on top, surrounded by hundreds of vehicles in various states of disrepair. A bored-looking attendant sat in a small office watching television when I walked in. "I need to get my car," I said, probably too aggressively. "It was towed from my house today. A 1967 Camaro." The attendant, whose name tag read Lewis, slowly turned away from his show and typed something into an ancient computer. Yeah, got it here. Towed this morning at 9:15. That will be $450 for the tow and the first day of storage. $450. Are you kidding me? Lewis shrugged. Rates are posted on the wall. You want your car or not? I pulled out my credit card, fuming. This was money I had been saving for the engine parts. Fine. Where is it? Lewis typed some more, his brow furrowing. Says here it already went to auction. What do you mean auction? You just towed it this morning. Yeah, but the HOA marked it as abandoned junk. We have a special agreement with them. Those vehicles go straight to our weekly auction if they are deemed inoperable. Saves storage space. That is illegal. You cannot just sell someone's property without giving them a chance to claim it. Lewis held up his hands defensively. Look, man, I just work here. You need to talk to my manager, but he is not in until tomorrow morning at 8. I felt like I was going to explode. When was the auction? Started at 3 this afternoon. Probably done by now. I checked my watch. It was 7:30. I had been in surgery all day, completely unreachable, while these people had stolen and sold my grandfather's car. Who bought it? I need to know who bought it. I cannot give out that information. You will have to talk to the manager tomorrow. I left the impound lot feeling completely helpless and furious. This could not be legal. There had to be consumer protection laws against this kind of thing. When I got home, I spent the next 3 hours researching Arizona towing laws and HOA regulations, and what I found made my blood boil even more. According to Arizona revised statutes, a towing company was required to notify the registered owner of a vehicle before selling it at auction, and there was supposed to be a minimum holding period. The only exception was if the vehicle was actually abandoned on public property, which mine clearly was not. It had been sitting in my own driveway on my own property. I barely slept that night. I kept thinking about my grandfather, how he had bought that Camaro brand new in 1967 with his first big paycheck from the copper mine where he worked. He had taken me for rides in it when I was a kid, and I remembered the smell of the leather seats and the roar of that big block engine. He had been so proud when he gave it to me before he passed, making me promise I would take care of it. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in over a year. I was at the impound lot when they unlocked the gates at 8. The manager, a heavy-set man named Richard Torres, seemed slightly more sympathetic than Lewis had been, but not by much. I understand your frustration, Mr. Lawson, he said, sitting behind a desk covered in paperwork. But we followed protocol. The HOA authorized the tow and classified the vehicle as inoperable and abandoned. It was not abandoned. It was in my driveway, and I was never notified. Richard pulled up some records on his computer. Says here we sent a notice to your address. I never received any notice. When did you supposedly send it? According to this, it was sent to your address at 9:30 yesterday morning, same day as the tow. That is not proper notice. You cannot send a notice and then auction the car 6 hours later. That is insane. Richard leaned back in his chair. The notice was a courtesy. According to our agreement with the Sunset Valley HOA, vehicles they classify as junk can be processed immediately. I want to know who bought my car. He hesitated, then pulled up another screen. The buyer was a man named Vincent Rossi. He is a regular at our auctions. Flips classic cars, I think. How much did he pay? The final bid was $3,500. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. My Camaro, which was easily worth $40,000 or more once restored, had been sold for pennies on the dollar. I need his contact information. I cannot give that out. Privacy policy. Then you need to contact him and tell him there was a mistake. That car was sold illegally and needs to be returned. Richard sighed. I can pass along a message, but I cannot force him to do anything. The sale is final once the auction ends. I left feeling even more frustrated than before. My next stop was the Sunset Valley HOA office, which was located in a small building near the neighborhood entrance. The office assistant, a young woman who looked like she wished she was anywhere else, told me Karren Mitchell had a meeting scheduled at noon and could see me then. I waited in that office for 3.5 hours, watching Karren come and go, chatting with other board members, completely ignoring the fact that I was sitting right there. Finally, at almost 4 in the afternoon, she called me into her office. "Ryan, I really do not understand what the problem is," she said, sitting behind her desk with that same condescending smile. "Your vehicle was in violation. We followed the proper procedures." "You did not follow any procedures," I said, struggling to keep my voice calm. "You had my car towed and sold without proper notice. That is theft." "That is not theft. That is enforcement of our community standards. Your vehicle was an eyesore that was bringing down property values. It was under a car cover. Nobody could even see it. We could see the shape of it. We knew what was under there, and several neighbors complained." "Which neighbors?" "I cannot disclose that information." I leaned forward. "Because there were no complaints. You just did not like it because you have a problem with me." Karren's smile disappeared. "Watch your tone, Mr. Lawson. I am trying to maintain a beautiful, orderly community here. If you cannot respect our rules, perhaps you should consider living elsewhere. I want my car back, or I want compensation for its full value." The car was sold for $3,500 at auction. After towing and processing fees, the HOA actually lost money on the whole affair. "You should be grateful we do not bill you for the difference." I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You have not heard the last of this. Are you threatening me?" "No. I am telling you I am getting a lawyer." I walked out before she could respond. My next stop was a law office downtown that specialized in property disputes. The attorney, a sharp-looking woman in her 40s named Patricia Gomez, listened to my story with increasing interest. "This is actually a pretty clear-cut case," she said after I finished. "They violated multiple statutes. The problem is that HOA disputes can take months or even years to resolve, and in the meantime, your car is gone. So what do I do? First, we file a complaint in small claims court. The limit is $3,500 in Arizona, which coincidentally is exactly what your car sold for at auction. That can get resolved relatively quickly. Then we file a separate suit in Superior Court for the actual value of the vehicle, which you said is around $40,000. At least, maybe more to the right collector. We will need documentation, appraisals, photos, maintenance records, anything that proves the car's value. I have all of that. My grandfather kept meticulous records and I have been documenting the restoration process." Patricia nodded. "Good. This is definitely worth pursuing. My retainer is $5,000. I winced. That was a huge chunk of my savings, but I did not see another option. "Fine. Let me get you everything you need." Over the next week, I gathered every piece of documentation I could find about the Camaro. Photos of my grandfather with the car in the 60s. The original sales paperwork. Maintenance records spanning 5 decades. Recent appraisals I had gotten for insurance purposes that valued the car at $42,000 in its current condition, with potential value up to $70,000 once fully restored. I had emails with the parts supplier in Detroit showing I had already invested $8,000 in specialized engine components that were currently sitting in my garage with no car to put them in. Patricia was impressed with my documentation. "This is better than most cases I see. The HOA really messed up here." But as we dug deeper into the situation, Things got even worse. Patricia discovered that the so-called notice the impound lot claimed to have sent was actually an email sent to an address I had never used or given to anyone. It was some generic version of my name at a common email provider, not my actual email address that was on file with the HOA. They fabricated the notice, Patricia said, showing me the records. This is looking more and more like fraud. We filed the small claims suit first, along with an emergency motion to try to stop Vincent Rossi from selling or modifying the Camaro before the case was resolved. The court date was set for 3 weeks out. Meanwhile, I decided to try to contact Vincent Rossi directly. Patricia had advised against it, but I needed to at least try. I found him on social media easily enough. He ran a business called Rossi Classic Restorations out of a shop in Mesa. His page was full of before and after photos of vintage cars he had restored and sold. I sent him a direct message explaining the situation. To my surprise, he responded within an hour. "Hey man, I had no idea about any of this. I bought the car fair and square at auction. I already put 10 grand into it for the engine work and some body repairs. Got it running yesterday actually." Sounds amazing. My heart sank. He had already put my parts money equivalent into my car. "I understand you did not know, but the car was sold illegally. I never authorized the tow. I have documentation proving ownership and value. Look, I feel bad for you, but I have a business to run. I bought it legally at a public auction. I cannot just give you a car I paid for and put work into. How much would you sell it to me for?" There was a long pause before he responded. "With what I have into it now and the market value, I would need at least 50 grand, $50,000. I did not have that kind of money, and it was more than the car was even worth. He was essentially holding my own property hostage and demanding a ransom. That is insane. You paid $3,500 for it, and I put 10 grand in parts and 20 hours of labor into it so far. Plus I know what these cars are worth. This is business, nothing personal." I wanted to reach through the screen and strangle him, but he was right about one thing. From his perspective, he had bought a car legally and invested money into it. He had no obligation to sell it back to me at a loss. The small claims court date arrived on a Tuesday morning. I took the day off work and met Patricia at the courthouse in downtown Phoenix. Karren Mitchell showed up wearing a business suit and brought the HOA's attorney, a slick-looking guy who probably charged $500 an hour. The judge, an older man named Robert Chen, listened to both sides present their cases. Karren's attorney argued that the HOA had every right to enforce their bylaws and that I had been properly notified of the violation. Patricia destroyed that argument by presenting evidence that the email address used for notification was not mine, and that the timeline between the supposed notice and the auction was impossibly short under Arizona law. Judge Chen did not look happy. "Miss Mitchell, did you make any attempt to contact Mr. Lawson by phone or in person before having his vehicle towed?" Karren hesitated. "I had spoken to him previously about the vehicle being an eyesore." "When was this conversation?" "Several months ago." "And did you give him a specific time frame to address the issue or warn him about potential towing?" "The bylaws are clear. Residents are expected to know and follow them." Judge Chen shook his head. "That is not how this works. You cannot just take someone's property without proper notice and due process. I am ruling in favor of Mr. Lawson. The HOA is ordered to pay him the auction sale price of $3,500, plus his towing fees of $450, plus court costs." It was a small victory, but it was not enough. That barely covered Patricia's retainer, and I was still out a $40,000 car. The bigger lawsuit in Superior Court was scheduled for 4 months away, but then something unexpected happened. That evening I got a phone call from a number I did not recognize. "Is this Ryan Lawson?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes, who is this?" "My name is Brenda Harper. I live in your neighborhood over on Cactus Ridge Drive. I heard about what happened with your car." "Okay." I used to be on the HOA board. I resigned last year because I could not stand working with Karren anymore. She has been abusing her position for years, and I have been documenting it. This got my attention. "What kind of abuse?" "Kickbacks from the towing company, for one thing. She has a deal with Desert Star where she gets a percentage of the auction sales for any vehicles she has towed. I have bank statements showing regular deposits from them to her personal account." I could not believe what I was hearing. That is fraud. It is worse than that. She has been doing it to multiple residents. You are not the first person to have a vehicle taken. There was a guy 2 years ago who had a boat in his driveway. Same thing happened. And last year, someone had a motorcycle. Karren has been using her position to essentially steal vehicles and profit from them. Why did not anyone report this before? Because most people do not fight it. They pay the fees and move on. And Karren is very careful. She only targets people who she thinks will not make waves. She picked you because you are single and work crazy hours. She thought you would not have time to fight back. Will you testify about this? Absolutely. I have been waiting for someone to actually take her to court. I have copies of everything. Bank statements, emails, text messages where she bragged about the arrangement. I kept it all. This changed everything. I immediately called Patricia and told her what I had learned. She was practically shouting with excitement. "This is huge. We are not just talking about a civil case anymore. This is criminal fraud. We need to contact the police." The next morning, Patricia and I met with a detective at the Phoenix Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit. Detective Sarah Morrison listened to our evidence with growing interest. Brenda Harper joined us and brought boxes of documentation. "This is a pretty sophisticated scheme," Detective Morrison said, flipping through bank statements. "If what you are showing me is accurate, Miss Mitchell has defrauded multiple residents out of thousands of dollars over at least 3 years. Can you arrest her?" I asked. "We need to build a case first. I will need to interview other victims, subpoena records from the towing company, get warrants for her financial records. This could take weeks or months. What about my car? It is sitting in someone's garage getting modified right now." Detective Morrison made a note. "If we can prove the car was obtained through fraudulent means, we might be able to seize it as evidence and eventually return it to you. But that is a ways down the road." I left the police station feeling frustrated but also hopeful. At least things were moving forward, even if slowly. Over the next few weeks, the investigation picked up steam. Detective Morrison discovered that Karren had been running this scheme for 5 years, not 3. She had arranged for over 30 vehicles to be towed and sold, pocketing 15% of each auction sale. The total amount she had stolen was over $200,000. The story broke in the local news, and suddenly, everyone in Sunset Valley was talking about it. Neighbors I had never spoken to before stopped me on the street to tell me their own stories about Karren's abuse of power. It turned out she had been terrorizing the neighborhood in all sorts of ways, far beyond just the vehicle scheme. One couple had been fined thousands of dollars for supposedly violating landscaping rules, even though their yard was immaculate. Karren had been friends with a particular landscaping company and was getting kickbacks for forcing residents to hire them. Another family had been threatened with foreclosure over HOA fees that they had actually already paid. Karren had pocketed their checks and marked them as delinquent. The more that came out, the worse it got. The woman had been running the HOA like her personal criminal enterprise for years. 6 weeks after our initial police report, Detective Morrison called me with news. "We are executing a warrant for Karren Mitchell's arrest today. I thought you might want to know." I took the afternoon off work and drove by Karren's house, keeping a respectful distance. I watched as 2 police cars pulled up, and Detective Morrison walked to the front door with another officer. Karren answered in her typical designer clothes, and I could see the moment reality hit her. Her face went pale, and she actually tried to close the door, but the officers stopped her. They put her in handcuffs and led her to the patrol car. As they drove past where I was parked down the street, I swear she looked right at me. The expression on her face was pure hatred and disbelief. She genuinely could not understand how someone like me, who she had clearly seen as beneath her, had managed to bring down her entire operation. The arrest made the evening news. "Local HOA president arrested in fraud scheme," the headline read. The charges included fraud, theft, embezzlement, and conspiracy. The towing company owner was arrested the same day, along with 2 of his employees who had helped facilitate the scheme, but I still did not have my car back. Vincent Rossi was not charged with anything since he had not known the car was stolen, but the car itself was seized as evidence. That meant it was sitting in another impound lot, this time one run by the police, and I could not touch it until the criminal case was resolved. The case moved faster than I expected, probably because the evidence was so overwhelming. Karren's attorney tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the prosecutor was not interested in going easy on her. The case went to trial 4 months after her arrest. I attended every day of the trial. It was fascinating and infuriating to watch Karren try to defend herself. She claimed she had just been trying to maintain community standards, and that any money she received was legitimate compensation for her time and effort as HOA president. The jury did not buy it. The prosecutors brought in victim after victim, each telling stories of how Karren had abused her power. They showed the bank records proving the kickback arrangement. They even had recordings of phone calls between Karren and the towing company owner, where they discussed which vehicles to target next based on their potential auction value. My Camaro became the centerpiece of the case because it was the highest value item she had stolen. The prosecution brought in a classic car appraiser who testified that the car was worth between $40,000 and $70,000, depending on the buyer. They showed photos of my grandfather with the car, documentation of the family history, proof that I had been actively working to restore it. Karren's attorney tried to argue that the car looked like junk and that Karren had genuinely believed it was abandoned. Patricia, who was there as a witness, took the stand and methodically destroyed that argument. She showed that Karren had specifically targeted my car when she saw me having it delivered on a flatbed 3 months earlier. A neighbor testified that Karren had asked him about the car and seemed very interested in what it was worth. The trial lasted 2 weeks. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. Karren sat there stone-faced as the verdict was read, but I saw her hands shaking. At sentencing, the judge did not hold back. "Miss Mitchell, you were in a position of trust within your community, and you abused that trust in the most egregious way possible. You stole from your neighbors. You defrauded people who had done nothing wrong, and you showed no remorse throughout this entire process. I am sentencing you to 7 years in state prison, followed by 5 years of probation. You are also ordered to pay full restitution to all victims, totaling $243,000. Karren finally showed emotion at that, tears running down her face as she was led away. I felt no sympathy. She had brought this entirely on herself. The best part was that the HOA board had taken out insurance specifically to protect against board member misconduct. The insurance company was on the hook for the restitution payments, which meant I would actually get my money without having to wait for Karren to somehow earn it from prison. 2 weeks after sentencing, I got the call I had been waiting for. My Camaro was being released from evidence and I could pick it up. I brought a flatbed truck to the police impound lot, half afraid of what condition the car would be in after sitting for months. But when they brought it out, I almost cried. Vincent Rossi had actually done beautiful work. The engine was rebuilt. It ran smoothly. The body work he had started was partially complete, and it looked better than it had in years. There was some debate about the work Vincent had done. He wanted compensation for his parts and labor, arguing that he was an innocent party who had invested his own money in good faith. My attorney argued that the car never should have been sold to him in the first place, and that his decision to invest money into a vehicle he bought at auction was his own business risk. Eventually, we reached a settlement. The insurance company paid Vincent $12,000 for his parts and labor, which was fair considering what he had actually put into the car. I got my Camaro back, plus a check for $42,000, the appraised value of the car in its pre-restoration condition. The insurance company was out $54,000 total for just my claim, plus hundreds of thousands more for the other victims. I used part of the settlement money to finish the restoration properly. I found a different shop, one recommended by a classic car club I had joined, and they did amazing work. 6 months after getting the car back, it was finished. Pearl blue paint, chrome shining, original interior restored, and that big block engine purring like a kitten. The first place I drove it was to the cemetery where my grandfather was buried. I parked next to his grave and just sat there for a while, running my hand over the steering wheel. "I kept my promise, Grandpa," I said out loud. "She is beautiful." The Sunset Valley HOA underwent major reforms after the scandal. The entire board resigned, and new elections were held with much stricter oversight rules. The new board president was actually Brenda Harper, the woman who had helped expose Karren's fraud. One of her first acts was to revise the bylaws to prevent anything like this from happening again. The sections about vehicle storage were completely rewritten. Now, residents were allowed to keep project cars on their property as long as they were making regular progress on restoration. There were actual notification requirements before any enforcement action could be taken, including certified mail and in-person contact. The HOA was prohibited from having any financial arrangements with towing companies or contractors. I even got invited to join the HOA board myself, but I politely declined. I had seen enough of HOA politics to last a lifetime. I was content to just live my life, go to work, and enjoy my weekends working on my car or driving it around the desert roads. About a year after the whole ordeal ended, I was at a classic car show in Scottsdale showing off the Camaro when someone tapped me on the shoulder. It was Vincent Rossi. "Hey man," he said, looking a bit uncomfortable. "I just wanted to say I am sorry about everything that happened." I had no idea the car was stolen when I bought it. "I know," I said. "You were just doing business." Still, I felt bad. "You got caught up in something that was not your fault. The car looks amazing, by the way. You did a great job finishing the restoration. You did good work, too. The engine rebuild you did is solid." We talked for a while about the car, the technical details of the restoration, and eventually about the whole crazy situation. Vincent told me he had almost gone out of business because of the scandal, since people had assumed he was part of the fraud scheme. It took months for him to rebuild his reputation. At least something good came out of it, he said. That HOA president got what she deserved and you got your car back. Yeah, it just took almost a year of fighting and thousands in legal fees. Was it worth it? I looked at the Camaro, gleaming in the Arizona sun, exactly the way my grandfather would have wanted it. Absolutely. The story made it into a couple of national news articles about HOA abuse, and I got contacted by several consumer advocacy groups asking me to talk about my experience. I did a few interviews, hoping it might help other people who were dealing with similar situations. The most surprising thing was the number of people who reached out to me with their own HOA horror stories. I heard from people all over the country who had been fined, harassed, or had their property taken by power-hungry board members. It made me realize how lucky I was that I had the resources and determination to fight back. A lot of people just gave up because they could not afford lawyers or did not know their rights. One of those people who contacted me was a journalist named Marcus Webb, who was writing a book about HOA abuse in America. He wanted to feature my story as one of his main case studies. I agreed, figuring it might help bring more attention to the problem. Marcus spent weeks interviewing me, going through all the documents, talking to Patricia and Brenda, and even getting interviews with some of the other victims. The book came out about 2 years after the initial incident, titled Tyranny in the Suburbs: How Homeowner Associations Abuse Their Power. My story took up an entire chapter. Marcus did a great job capturing not just the facts of what happened, but the emotional toll it took. He wrote about my grandfather and what the car meant to me, about the helplessness I felt watching my property get stolen through legal loopholes, about the victory of seeing justice finally served. The book got some attention, including an appearance by Marcus on a few cable news shows. He always made sure to mention that none of it would have come to light if I had not fought back, which was nice even if it made me uncomfortable being in the spotlight. Through it all, I kept working as a surgical nurse, kept living in my house in Sunset Valley, and kept driving my Camaro. The neighborhood was actually a pretty nice place to live once the tyrannical HOA board was gone. People were friendlier, the new board was reasonable, and there was a real sense of community. I even started a small informal club for neighborhood residents who were working on project cars. We would meet up once a month, share tips and tools, and just enjoy talking about our vehicles. It turned out there were several other people in the neighborhood who had been afraid to work on their cars because of Karren's previous reign of terror. Now they felt free to pursue their hobbies without fear. One of those people was a guy named Tony Chen who lived a few streets over. He had a 1969 Mustang Boss 429 that he had been hiding in his garage for years, afraid to even let people know it existed. After Karren was gone, he started bringing it out, and we became good friends working on our cars together. "You know what the crazy thing is?" Tony said one Saturday while we were changing the oil in my Camaro in my driveway. "I almost moved away because of her. I was this close to selling my house just to get away from the HOA. Now I cannot imagine living anywhere else." "That is what she wanted," I said. She wanted to drive out anyone who did not fit her perfect picture of what the neighborhood should be. Well, she is gone and we are still here. I call that a win. He was right. It was a win. Not just getting my car back, not just seeing Karren go to prison, but reclaiming the neighborhood from someone who had turned it into her personal dictatorship. The financial impact of the settlement was significant for me too. After legal fees and finishing the restoration, I still had about $20,000 left over. I used some of it to take a vacation, my first real vacation in 5 years. I drove the Camaro up the California coast, all the way to San Francisco and back, just enjoying the open road and the freedom that came with it. The rest of the money I invested wisely. I put a big chunk into retirement savings and used some to finally furnish my house properly. For the first time since buying the place, it actually felt like a home rather than just a place I slept between shifts at the hospital. Work got better too. I had been so stressed during the whole ordeal that it had affected my performance. Once it was over, I felt like I could breathe again. I got a promotion to senior surgical nurse, with a raise and better hours. Life was finally getting back to normal, or rather, better than normal. I started dating again too, something I had not had time or energy for during the legal battle. I met a woman named Beth Harrison at the classic car show where I had run into Vincent. She was there with her father, who had a pristine 1970 Plymouth Barracuda. We hit it off immediately. Beth was a teacher at a local high school, and she thought the whole story about my car and the HOA was both terrible and hilarious. Only you could turn an HOA dispute into a criminal case, she joked. I did not turn it into anything. Karren did that all by herself. True, but most people would have just given up. The fact that you fought for a year to get your grandfather's car back says a lot about you. We had been dating for about 6 months when she asked me something I had not expected. Would you ever sell it? The Camaro, I mean. Why would I sell it? I do not know. It is worth a lot of money and you went through hell to keep it. Would not it be easier to just cash out? I thought about it for a moment. No, it is not about the money. It never was. This car is the last piece of my grandfather I have. When I am driving it, I feel connected to him. Does that sound weird? No, she said, squeezing my hand. It sounds perfect. About 3 years after the whole incident, I got a letter in the mail from the Arizona Department of Corrections. It was from Karren Mitchell. I almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity got the better of me. The letter was surprisingly short. Ryan, I know you probably do not want to hear from me, but I wanted you to know that I am sorry for what I did. I know that does not change anything, and I do not expect your forgiveness. I have had a lot of time to think about my actions and the people I hurt. I was wrong, and I let power go to my head. I hope you are doing well, and I am glad you got your car back. Karren. I read it twice, trying to figure out how I felt about it. Was she genuinely sorry, or was this some kind of ploy for early parole? Did it even matter? I decided it did not matter. Whether she was truly remorseful or not, it did not change what she had done or the consequences she faced. I put the letter in a drawer and never responded. Life continued to move forward. Beth and I got more serious, and eventually she moved into my house. She loved the neighborhood and got along great with everyone. We even hosted some of the HOA meetings at our place, which was surreal considering how the whole thing started. I kept the Camaro in pristine condition, taking it to shows and occasionally racing it at the local drag strip. It never failed to turn heads wherever I went. People would come up and ask about it, and I always told them the whole story. A lot of them could not believe it, but the ones who had dealt with difficult HOAs totally understood. The car became somewhat famous in the local classic car community. It was not just because it was a beautiful restoration of a rare muscle car, but because of the story behind it. That is the HOA car, people would say, and everyone knew what they meant. One day, about 4 years after everything was resolved, I was at a gas station filling up the Camaro when an older man approached me. He was probably in his 70s, wearing a Korean War veteran cap. "That is a beautiful Camaro," he said. 67. Yes, sir. SS with a 396 big block. I had one just like it, same year, same color. Sold it in the 80s when my kids were born and needed a family car. Biggest mistake I ever made. We talked for a while about the car, and I told him the whole story about my grandfather and the HOA situation. His eyes got wide when I told him about the theft and the legal battle. "Good for you for fighting back," he said. "Too many people just roll over when they get pushed around. Your grandfather would be proud." After he walked away, I sat in the car for a minute before starting it up. He was right. My grandfather would be proud, not just of the car, but of the fact that I had stood up for what was right, even when it was difficult and expensive and time-consuming. That was really what the whole thing had been about. Yes, I loved the car, and yes, it had sentimental value. But it was also about principle. It was about not letting someone abuse their power just because they thought they could get away with it. It was about fighting for what was rightfully mine, even when the system seemed stacked against me. Karren had thought I would be an easy target. Single guy, worked long hours, no family in the area. She thought I would not have the time or resources to fight back. She was wrong. The HOA reforms that came out of the scandal had ripple effects beyond just Sunset Valley. Other HOAs in Arizona started reviewing their own policies after seeing what had happened. The state legislature even passed new laws strengthening homeowner protections and limiting HOA power. It was not perfect, but it was progress. I got invited to speak at a few homeowner advocacy group meetings, sharing my story and encouraging people to know their rights. It was strange being seen as some kind of HOA resistance hero, but if my experience could help other people avoid similar situations, it was worth it. Beth and I got married 5 years after we met, in a small ceremony at a vineyard outside of Phoenix. We drove away from the reception in the Camaro, tin cans tied to the bumper and "Just Married" written on the back window. My grandfather's car, the one Karren Mitchell had tried to steal and sell for scrap, was now carrying me into the next chapter of my life. Sometimes I wondered what would have happened if I had not fought back, if I had just accepted the loss and moved on with my life. I probably would have saved money on legal fees. I definitely would have saved stress and time, but I also would have lost more than just a car. I would have lost a piece of my grandfather's legacy, and I would have let someone get away with abusing their power. The Camaro sat in my garage most days now, driven on weekends and special occasions. It was worth even more than before, with professional appraisals putting it at over $80,000 thanks to the quality of the restoration. But I would never sell it. It meant too much. Every time I started that engine and heard it roar to life, I thought about my grandfather. I thought about him buying this car brand new in 1967, excited about his future. I thought about him taking me for rides as a kid, letting me shift gears while sitting on his lap. I thought about him giving it to me before he died, trusting me to take care of it. And I thought about Karren Mitchell sitting in prison, probably regretting the day she decided to mess with something that did not belong to her. She had thought she was above the law, that her position as HOA president gave her the right to do whatever she wanted. She learned the hard way that nobody is above the law. The insurance company that paid out all the claims ended up suing the HOA's previous management company for negligence. Apparently, they should have had better oversight to prevent someone like Karren from abusing her position for so long. That case settled out of court for an undisclosed amount, but I heard it was substantial. Desert Star Auto Impound went out of business. After the owner was convicted as part of the fraud scheme, nobody wanted to use them anymore. The business was liquidated and the property sold. I did not feel bad about that at all. They had been willing participants in Karren's scheme, and they deserved what they got. Vincent Rossi ended up doing pretty well despite the initial hit to his reputation. Once people understood he had been an innocent party, his business bounced back. We stayed friendly. occasionally running into each other at car shows. There were no hard feelings. He had just been in the wrong place at the wrong time. Tony Chen and I stayed friends, working on our cars together and occasionally taking road trips to car shows around the Southwest. His Boss 429 was truly a special car, worth probably 6 figures to the right collector. We joked that we should start a support group for people with valuable classic cars who lived in HOA neighborhoods. The new HOA board under Brenda Harper's leadership was everything the old one was not. They were reasonable, communicative, and actually seemed to care about the neighborhood rather than just wielding power. Dues went down because they eliminated all the kickback schemes and sweetheart contracts. Community satisfaction went way up. I eventually did join the HOA board, about 6 years after the whole incident. I figured I owed it to the neighborhood to help make sure nothing like that ever happened again. I served one 3-year term and then stepped down, content that the reforms we had put in place would last. Beth and I had our first kid 7 years into our marriage, a son we named Paul after my grandfather. The Camaro was waiting in the garage for him, just like it had waited for me. I planned to teach him to drive in it when he was old enough, and eventually it would be his. Looking back on everything, I realized the whole ordeal had changed me in ways I did not expect. I was more confident, more willing to stand up for myself, more aware of my rights as a homeowner and a citizen. I had learned that fighting back against injustice was worth it, even when it was hard. The Camaro was not just a car anymore. It was a symbol of perseverance, of family legacy, of standing up for what was right. Every time I looked at it, I was reminded that some things are worth fighting for, no matter the cost. Karren Mitchell served 5 years of her 7-year sentence before being released on parole. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she moved to Nevada after her release, wanting to get away from Phoenix, where everyone knew what she had done. I never heard from her again after that one letter, and I was fine with that. The story of my Camaro and the HOA fraud became somewhat legendary in our community. New residents would hear about it and come, ask me if it was really true. I would tell them the whole story, showing them the newspaper articles and court documents I had kept. Most people could barely believe it, but it served as a good reminder of why the current HOA protections were so important. As I sat in my garage one Saturday afternoon, 10 years after Karren had first had my car towed, I ran my hand along the Camaro's fender. The paint was still perfect, the chrome still gleaming. It looked exactly as my grandfather would have wanted it. Beth came out to the garage with little Paul, who was 3 now. "Daddy's car," he shouted excitedly, running over to touch the shiny blue paint. "Grandpa's car," I corrected gently. "Daddy is just taking care of it for now. Someday it will be yours." "My car," Paul said, which made Beth and me both laugh. I picked him up and set him in the driver's seat, letting him pretend to steer while making engine noises. He had no idea of the story behind this car, of what it had taken to keep it in the family. Someday I would tell him, when he was old enough to understand. I would tell him about his great-grandfather Paul, who bought it new in 1967, about how it got passed down to me, about how someone tried to take it away but justice prevailed. And I would tell him that some things are worth fighting for, no matter how hard the fight might be. Family, legacy, principle, justice. These things matter. The Camaro was all of those things rolled into one beautiful package of steel and chrome and American muscle. The engine roared to life as I turned the key, that distinctive sound that only a big block Chevy can make. Paul squealed with delight from his car seat that we had strapped into the passenger side. Beth climbed in the back, and we headed out for a cruise through the desert. The sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and purple as we drove down the highway, windows down, engine rumbling. This was what it was all about. Not the money, not the legal victory, not even the justice of seeing Karren Mitchell go to prison. It was about this moment, this feeling, this connection to the past and the future all at once. My grandfather's Camaro had survived decades of use, years of storage, an attempted theft by a corrupt HOA president, and a legal battle that made local news. And it was still here, still running strong, still turning heads wherever it went. As we drove back home that evening, the car running smooth and strong, I made a silent promise to my grandfather and to my son. This car would stay in the family. No HOA, no corrupt official, no amount of money would ever take it away again. It was more than just a car. It was family history, rolling on four wheels, and that was worth everything.